Hi. We are here with W. Curtis Preston, aka the Mr. Backup, who's an expert in backup and recovery systems, a space he's been working in since 1993. He's written 4 books on the subject, the fourth of which is Modern Data Protection from O'Reilly, published in May 2021. I've had a little skim of that beauty. He is the host of the Restore It All podcast, another great contribution to the space. I've been listening to that one quite a bit recently, especially the Back to Basics series. And currently, Curtis is Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva, a data protection as a service company, cloud offering, which I'm sure we'll get into discussing a little bit later on in more detail. The sun has set here on the UK's Devonshire coast, but is rising in Oceanside, California. Good morning, Curtis. How's the weather looking?
Well, it's San Diego, so it looks exactly the same as it did yesterday, which is, sunny and a little bit what we would think of as chilly. I think it's about 50 degrees outside. I don't do Celsius, but
I don't do Fahrenheit.
I think that's in the teens. Yeah, it's nice. By the way, is that the home of the cream?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have a lot of clotted cream down here. It's a delicacy. So you have a thing called cream tea. It's a scone,
Right.
depending on how posh you want to be. And then you put the cream on. Always cream on first, then the jam.
Always cream
Calorific.
First, because
Cream on first.
Oddly enough, my first introduction to Devonshire cream was in Australia.
Okay. Well, they're upside down there. You see, they're in a different hemisphere. Yeah, we're also having some, obviously, being British, we have to talk about the weather to begin with. That's part of the pleasantry. So yeah, we're about 1 degree Celsius today, but very nice.
1 degree Celsius.
Crisp winter days.
And how about the precipitation?
No, well, I'm by the coast here in Torquay, so when it does snow, it rarely settles. The sea just keeps the land a bit too warm. But anyway, I think
that's by the way, I found out the weather here is 10 degrees Celsius today.
10 degrees Celsius. Okay, so yeah, we're not far off. Yeah. We'd like to start by discussing sort of how vulnerable are backups to cyber attacks at the moment, and as well, what changes should the backup and disaster recovery people be considering when thinking about cyber recovery? What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to put this in the really vulnerable category, and I think it's really vulnerable for a number of things, or for a number of reasons. The first, and it can't be underestimated, the first reason is that no one pays any attention to the backup system, right? This is, you mentioned that I've been in the industry coming up on 30 years. Actually, possibly by the time this episode airs, it will have been 30 years, because I started it in January of 1993. And one thing has never changed, and that is that no one wants to be the backup person, right? Because you're either invisible or you're in trouble. No one remembers the 1,000 backups that you got right, only the one restore that you got wrong. And so nobody wants to be. It's not like information security, where people are going to college to be an information security specialist. And so it's a revolving door, and so no one's really paying attention to the server. So it's vulnerable just in terms of, it's always been that way. But the second and more recent reason is that cyber attackers, right, bad actors, have started realizing that they started realizing that themselves. So they're realizing that the backup server, if they can take it out, number one, it will make their ransomware attack more successful. And number two, and this is the more recent of this, is that you're well aware, I'm sure, that the ransomware attacks have morphed from the traditional ransomware attack, where, the traditional ransomware attack is I encrypt all your data, or maybe even delete all your data, and then give me $1 million, or you can't have your data back. The new extortion style is I've stolen all your data, I have it in plain text, and I'm going to publish your company's secrets, which may be intellectual property, or it may be something really embarrassing. Either way,
Right.
your company will be damaged. That's the new way. And the cyber, the bad actors have realized, what's harder, or what's easier, to attack 100 servers and get some good data, or attack one server that has all the data. So they're going after the backup server as a source for that extortionware. And so then I'm going to add sort of a third thing onto this, and that is that because the backup server historically wasn't, the primary target for cyber attacks, they often don't have the best design from a cybersecurity perspective. In fact, they have, quite often a horrible design. Not necessarily, and I'm not necessarily picking on the software itself. If you go back, they have over the last several years added things like RBAC, right? Role-based administration, right? They've started doing that, and they've, because when I started, you had to be root or administrator to run the backup system, and that's just not good, right? So they started moving and adding more security. So it's not necessarily the backup software product itself, but the fact that it's often running on, the same architecture, specifically Windows, that most people are attacking, right? It's not that, I'm not necessarily trying to make a Windows versus Linux point here, but it's pretty obvious that Windows is the primary attack point for today's ransomware. And then the fact that this other move that we made about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the move away from tape to disk as a primary storage mechanism for backups, right? So that we did it for a lot of really good reasons, but one really bad outcome of that is that if you just sort of follow the default installation of most backup products, you end up with your backup sitting there as files, accessible via the file system on the system that is running the same operating system as everything else being attacked, right? And so, and then, you combine all of that together, and you have the problem that we have today, is that so you have servers that aren't being properly cared for, run by often very junior people, using designs and configurations that are very insecure, being directly targeted by all the bad guys. Right. So it's what is the perfect storm? Yeah, there we go. I knew that phrase was there somewhere.
It kind of answers the first question, is, are backups vulnerable to cyber attacks? I think you've answered that pretty concisely and affirmatively.
I'm not concise, but I definitely answered it.
I think the answer we're looking for is yes. And I was thinking ahead before you even mentioned, the 15-year change of moving from tapes. I mean, I'm guessing ransomware wasn't possible on tapes.
No, well, so it's incredibly difficult, or it's harder, right? So we wouldn't have been able, a bad actor wouldn't have been able to extract the data the way you can. If you can figure out how the data is encrypted and you can unencrypt it, it's super easy if it's sitting there as a file. On a tape, it's just harder. If it's on a tape, in a tape library, you could do bad things to it. You could delete it. You could potentially extract it. It's just harder, right? But now all the backups are sitting there on a disk waiting to be, exfiltrated.